Okay, welcome everybody. Who's glad to be in the house of the Lord today? Come on, come on. Man, whether you're with us on one of our campuses in person or whether you're online with us today, we're so glad you could be here to worship with us. And I am so excited about this service. You're going to be excited about it. It's going to be awesome. This past week we had our pastoral staff retreat, and we asked a friend of mine named Dave Dummitt if he would come in and teach our staff for a day. And man, it was amazing. We were so blessed to have Dave come and just pour into our staff. Dave, in 2005, moved his family to Detroit, Michigan to start a church. 35 people gathered in his living room. 15 years later, there were 11,000 people meeting in that community over, I don't know how many campuses, 7, 8, 15, 25, I don't know. But anyway, man, it was just an amazing ministry. And did I say it was in Detroit? Detroit, Michigan? And man, God just did a remarkable job there. And then a couple years ago, God called Dave to go to be the pastor of Willow Creek Community Church in Chicago. Now, how many of y'all have ever heard of Willow Creek Community Church? That church had a profound blessing on our church, and then about 4 years ago, in 2018, went through a horrible scandal, and it just turned the ministry upside down. A church that was doing so well, all of a sudden is just struggling. And you know, when somebody is struggling, you know what God does? He sends somebody to help. And that's what happened when Dave and Rachel and their 4 kids moved from Detroit and the ministry that they loved in the middle of COVID to Chicago to become the new pastor at Willow Creek Community Church. He had to say goodbye to his church, where he served for 15 years on Zoom, and he had to say hello to his new church on Zoom. And man, that would be so daunting to me. But God has used Dave in a remarkable way. I believe that God sent Dave in there to redeem that church and to bless that church. And he has done it, and he's going to bless our church as well. We are blessed to have him come. Let's give a warm, compassionate welcome to our friend Dave Dummitt as he comes to preach the word. All right, man.
I love you, pal.
Oh, man, I finally get to meet you. I have stalked your church for years. Just watching you guys from across the country, just aware of the amazing things that were going on here. And then finally getting to meet your staff this week is amazing. And I know, you would just expect me to say this, but believe me when I tell you, you have a very special team of people that is your staff. Can we just give it up for your staff? Amazing, amazing people. We had such a good time. And I will say this too, I have watched Cam and gotten to know him over the last couple of years, and I've looked up to him and learned from him, and even over the course of this last couple of days, I've just been peppering him with all kinds of questions and learning everything I can. So I am super excited to be here. And here's the thing, like when you meet somebody new, I don't feel like you're really friends until you meet their family. So if it's okay with you, this is my family right here. This is Luke, he's my oldest son. This is Grace, my oldest daughter. And then I've got Joe right there. And then we adopted Alex 3 years ago. And here's what I want you to know about those kids. Every one of them is a teenager. So if we could just pray right now for me and my wife. And then this is my wife right there. Her name is Rachel. And man, I know you look at her and you look at me and then you look back at her. And then look at me and you go, how did a girl like that end up with a guy like that? And I get it. And I just want to say the way it happened was I just got tired of her begging me all the time, just wore me down over time. No, I'm just kidding. But man, I love my family. And, we spent a lot of time in Cincinnati, in that area, but also in Kentucky because that's where my family's from. And I want to tell you that the man that baptized me is a good old boy from Kentucky. And that has played a part in my ministry and the missionary. It's being a missionary to the north for a long time, and it's good to be back here. Hey, you know what? The guy that baptized me, that good old boy from Kentucky, he drove what you would expect a good old boy from Kentucky to drive. You know what I'm talking about? A pickup truck, right? He drove this old pickup truck, and he would tell me this story, and I just love this story. It was an old pickup truck, the kind that was old enough to have a bench seat. You know what I'm talking about? Go like this, yeah. So he had a bench seat, and he was driving this old thing, and it was all rusty and dented up, and he and his wife were out one day, and they pulled up on a red light behind the same year and model truck that they were driving in. But instead of their old truck, this couple that was in the truck ahead of them, they had restored the truck. They had made it all retro and cool and everything. And of course, the young couple that was inside was kind of retro and cool as well. And my friend was sitting there with his wife at the red light, and they had watched this young girl had slid over that bench seat and kind of had her arm around the driver and was just kind of whispering sweet nothings into his ear and playing with his hair and all that kind of stuff. So my friend is sitting there at the red light, and he hears, humph, like that. And he's like, I'm not touching that. I'm not going to say a word. I don't know. And so he sat there for a second, and he heard it again. Humph. And he said, what is it, honey? And she said, well, look at that. And he said, yeah, that's a beautiful truck. They did a great job restoring that. I see what you're talking about. It's amazing. She said, no, don't you remember when we used to be like that? And in a moment of husband genius, y'all, he was sitting there and he goes, well, I haven't moved. And we haven't seen him since. I don't know where he is. I have not seen my friend since. But he tells that story and I tell that story because isn't it so true that if we're not careful in any relationship, we can drift apart? Isn't that right? Like that, you don't have to try. It's just kind of the natural progression. If you're not careful, you can drift. And that's true in human relationships. It's also true in your relationship with God, isn't it? That if you're not intentional about it, you can drift apart. In fact, let me ask you this question. Compassion, has there ever been a time in your life that you've been closer to God than you are right now? Like, have you ever worshiped Him more passionately? Has there ever been a time in your life when you followed Him more obediently? Has there ever been a time when you've given to Him more generously? Has there ever been a time when you've followed Him more boldly and taken more risks because you trusted Him more? Has there ever been a time in your life where you just felt closer to God than you are right now? Or maybe you haven't had a lot of time with God. Maybe you haven't been walking with God for a long time and you're just going, honestly, I just feel far from Him right now. Well, I just want to start this message with some good news, gospel, grace-filled truth. And that is this. God sits right there waiting for you to come back. God hasn't moved, and He is so ready to say, you know what, come on back. I love you. I accept you. I forgive you. I want to be close to you. And somebody ought to be clapping right now because that is the gospel right there. That is good news. Now, I share that with you because as I read the passage for today, I see Paul, the Apostle Paul, one of the early church leaders, writing a letter to his young protege named Timothy, and he's passing on some wisdom to Timothy. And I believe that one of the places that he starts is emphasizing this idea that we need to have a close relationship with God. Look what he says. I'm going to be in verse 17. He says, but the Lord stood at my side. You see it? Like he felt like God was right there. And He gave me strength so that through me the message might be fully proclaimed and all the Gentiles might hear it. And I was delivered from the lion's mouth, and the Lord will rescue me from every evil attack. Have you ever been so close to God you've just got a confidence walking around? It said the Lord will rescue me from every evil attack and will bring me safely to His heavenly kingdom. To Him be glory forever and ever. Amen. You see, for Paul, this whole relationship with God thing, it was not a religion. It was not about rules. It wasn't about rituals, empty rituals, just going through the motion. For him, it was a tight relationship with God. And so I would say that what Paul would be communicating to Timothy, and what I'll just communicate to you, is that if you want to live a life that really honors God, if you want to live a life that really makes a difference in this world, if you want to live a life that matters, then you ought to draw closer to God. You ought to draw closer to God. You see, Paul was a church planter. He planted all kinds of churches around Asia Minor. Paul wrote about half the New Testament of the Bible. Paul wrote it. And Paul's the one that was responsible for basically sharing the good news about Jesus beyond the Jewish community and to the Gentile community. So if you're here today or watching at one of our campuses, here's the thing. Like if you're not Jewish, you can thank God for Paul because he's the one that took the good news outside the Jewish community so that you and I could experience it. Paul lived a life that really mattered. And I believe he would say to Timothy, you know what, draw closer to God. That's number one. Number two, Number two, Timothy, young Timothy, my protege. If you're going to live a life that really matters, you need to discover God's purpose for you, God's calling on your life. Look what he writes. I'm going to be back up in verse number 1. He says, in the presence of God and of Christ Jesus, who will judge the living and the dead, in view of his appearing and his kingdom, I give you this charge, young Timothy. Preach the word. Be prepared in season and out of season, correct and rebuke and encourage with great patience and careful instruction. He's saying to Timothy, you know what? No matter what you do, your purpose in life is to share the good news about Jesus. Your purpose in life is to tell others about me. Let me ask you, compassion, let me ask you, do you know your purpose in life? Do you know the calling, like why God put you on this earth, why he allows you to wake up one more day, to draw one more breath? Because here's the thing, if we don't discover our purpose, God's purpose for us, it's going to be really hard for us to live a life that really matters. And the longer you go without knowing that purpose, well, you may find yourself feeling like Isaiah did when he wrote, I have labored to no purpose. I've spent my strength in vain and for nothing. Have you ever felt like that? You ever gotten up to go another day to work and just think, man, what is all this for? What is all this work really for? I tell you, there are some jobs that, to be honest, like it's just hard to get out of bed every morning for. In fact, if we were to sit down and have coffee, and we were to discuss that and say, you know what do you think would be some of the hardest jobs to get out of bed for and feel like you're waking up with some sort of like grand vision for your life or calling or purpose? I bet at some point we would say, you know what? It's got to be hard to be a garbage man, especially in the middle of summer, right? I don't know too many garbage men that wake up every day excited to go to work, but I know one. I know one because when I was a student in college, I kind of caught the short end of the straw, or the small straw, and I had to take the garbage out, and it was in the middle of winter in Chicago. It was freezing cold outside. It was in the morning, and I just did not want to be out there. And so I think I must have had just a big frown on my face, because when I'm dumping that garbage in, here comes the garbage truck, and the door swings open, and out jumps the garbage man, and he's got paper in his hand, and he goes, having a trashy day? Try Jesus, is what he said to me. And sure enough, in his hand, he had notebook paper that he had made a Bible tract. Some of you know what I'm talking about when I say Bible tract. He had written Bible verses on there that were supposed to help lead people to Christ. And he took one look at me with a frown on my face and he said, that guy needs Jesus. And you know what? We got to talking, and you know, one of the things he said to me that I'll never forget, he said, Dave, you got to understand, like I get up every day and I see my garbage route like a missionary journey. I get up every day and I pray, hey, God, show me somebody that needs Jesus. Show me somebody that I can pray for, somebody that needs encouragement. God, you just use me today and everywhere you can. And he said, so it's no accident that we met today. And then he said something I'll never forget. He said, Dave, you need to understand, I'm not a garbage man who just happens to be a Christian. I'm a Christian who just happens to be a garbage man. And that makes all the difference, young man. And he said that to me, and I tell you what, I have lived with that. I have processed that. I've just been thinking about that ever since. And do you know that I think it works with just about every career? I mean, when you think about it, like you're not just a teacher who happens to be a Christ follower. You're a follower of Jesus whose mission field just happens to be the classroom. You're not a banker who just happens to own a Bible and open it up every once in a while. You're a student of God's word. You're a follower of Jesus who just happens to work with money, right? Like no matter what you do, whether you're an engineer, a homemaker, or a business owner, or whatever you do, you are a follower of Jesus, and your purpose in life happens to be the exact same as Timothy's, which is to to preach the word. Now, you may not get up on a stage to preach it. You may preach it with your life. You may preach it with the way you serve people. You may preach it with the integrity with which you work. You may preach it with your words. You may preach in all kinds of different ways, but make no mistake, it is your purpose as a follower of Jesus to preach that word and share the good news about Jesus. If you want to live a life that really matters, discover that purpose. Number one is to draw closer to God. And then number 3, I'm in verse 5, it says, but you keep your head in all situations, Timothy. Endure hardship. Now, that's just a short little verse, but don't skip over it too quickly. Timothy was enduring a lot of hardship. Timothy had people, as we read the letters that he was, we can see, he had people that were looking down upon him just because he was young. If you're a young person here today and you're dreaming big dreams, you're wanting to speak out against injustice, you're trying to start something, you want to take on levels of leadership, you want to take risks. Has anybody ever looked at you and said, hey man, who do you think you are? Look how young you are to be dreaming so big. And maybe some of you that are a little older, do you remember when that happened? Like when you were young and you started thinking, man, maybe I could do this. And you started dreaming big dreams and people would just kind of look down upon you like, who do you think you are? You're not enough, or you can't handle it. People were looking down at Timothy that way. You're young. You know what else he had to deal with? False teachers. He had people that when they would come to church like this, or at all of our campuses, we'd come to church like this, and Cam would get up here and teach. And then just imagine if on your way out there were people that were handing out little pamphlets or people that were whispering in your ear like, I know what Cam said, but let me tell you what the Bible really means. And they were teaching false doctrine. And Timothy had to deal with that. And he also had to deal with the Romans. The Roman police, that if we were gathering like this for church, they could bust in here at any time. They could break us up. They could arrest somebody. They could take away your business. They could take away your possessions. They could put you in jail, all just because you were here worshiping the Lord. And that's what Timothy had to deal with. And Paul says, you know what? Endure hardship. Now, I don't know about you, but I don't want to endure hardship. I want to avoid hardship. Like at all costs. I want to be comfortable. I want to be safe. I don't want to endure hardship. I want to avoid it at all costs. But the more I read Scripture, the more I see, I don't know if that's God's perspective on hardship. I don't know if his opinion on hardship is always the same as mine. The half-brother of Jesus, his name was James, and he wrote a book of the Bible, cleverly titled James, and he wrote in there these words: consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of many kinds. And don't you, when you read that, don't you want to lean in and go, what? He said, yeah, because you know that the testing of your faith, it produces perseverance. All right, well, let perseverance finish its work so that you may be mature and complete, not lacking anything. And sure enough, when you sit on that for a while, you start to think about the idea that hardship is actually one of those things that kind of develops your faith. It helps you mature. It gives you some grit in life. In fact, let me ask you this. Think about the time in your life that you grew the most. Just go back and think about the time that your faith grew the most, that you feel like you matured as a person the most. And let me ask you, wasn't that during a time of hardship? I mean, quite often that's the case. And that people would say, you know what, I don't necessarily want to choose to go back there. I don't know if I'd choose to go through it again, but now that I'm through it and I look back and I go, you know what, I'm almost grateful that it happened. Because it helped me become who I am today. Little Timmy was walking in the woods, and he came upon a butterfly that was just emerging from its chrysalis. And that ooey gooey sticky stuff that's in the chrysalis, he was struggling to break free one wing. and then struggling to break free one of those 6 legs, and then number 2 of those 6 legs, and then number 3 and 4. And Timmy is just fascinated by all of this. He is leaning in, he is watching it. And there's one wing that the butterfly is just really struggling with, and Timmy decides, I can't even stand it anymore. And so he reaches down and he helps the butterfly out by plucking that chrysalis and setting the butterfly free. The butterfly walks to the end of the branch and leaps into the air and falls to the ground. Because the way God designed it is that it's the struggle in emerging from the chrysalis that builds the muscles in the wings of the butterfly that enables it to fly. And do you know the same God that designed that process for a butterfly, he designed you and me as well. And sure enough, God designed and put it into our process that the struggles in life can actually become places where we mature and develop and get to the place where maybe without those things, we wouldn't be able to fly as high as God designed us to fly. Endure hardship. Now, this next one, how do we live a life that really matters? This next one, I wasn't quite sure how to teach it. I got to be honest. I just wasn't sure how I was going to handle it, and I was thinking about it. I flew into Phoenix a few days ago, and I was tired. I mean, it was a long flight from Chicago, and I had to speak the next morning, and I get into the hotel, and all I wanted to do was just take a hot shower and hit the rack, just go to sleep, get ready. And I go into the bathroom, and I don't know if you do a lot of traveling or not, but I go into the bathroom, and I get one of the towels from the hotel. And first of all, it's like Papa Smurf must have designed this towel because it's like this big, okay? And it's been washed, because it's a hotel towel, it's been washed like a zillion times. And so it's paper thin. It feels like sandpaper. And I'm like, And then I remembered, there's a Target next to the hotel. And I thought, you know what is great? When you get out of a shower, I just want a nice, big, hot, fluffy towel. And so I thought to myself, I am going to go next door to that Target, because how much is the towel? I didn't know. It was like, I don't know, like $12 or something. And so I went to the Target, and I found a towel. And it was only like $13.23. And here's the thing. I'm worth that, okay? And so I grabbed the towel, and I put it in my cart, and I turned to go. Now, here's the thing. When I turned it, there was an end cap that said 75% off bed sheets. And I'd just seen some of those reports with the bed bugs in the hotels and those purple lights that they put in the hotel. And it's like, I don't know what's been in there. And I thought to myself, you know what? I appreciate a good thread count. And so 75% off, I hope my wife is not going to watch this. I took them and I put them in my cart. And I went a little bit further. And then I saw a Dyson fan. Have y'all seen a Dyson fan? It is a bladeless fan. How does it move the air? I don't know. Voodoo magic somehow cools off a room. And I'm like, that is so cool. And I'm in Phoenix, and how do I know if the air conditioning is going to keep up? So I put the Dyson fan in my cart. I went a little bit further, and that's when I remembered that the TV in the hotel room, only 27 inches. And people shouldn't have to live like that, okay? So I went and got a 55-inch TV, and I put it in the cart, and I checked out. I went ahead and called a contractor. I said, could you come over? What I'd like to do is bump out a bay window, get a hot tub right there in my hotel room. And I'm just watching faces in the room and at those campuses, and I feel like I've lost you at some point. I feel like at some point you just kind of went, wait a second, you didn't buy all that stuff. You didn't buy all that stuff, and you're right, I didn't. But let me ask you, did you think something like, you didn't buy all that stuff, because why would anybody spend so much money on a place that he's only going to stay a couple nights? And if you thought that, can I ask you a question? Why do we spend so much money and so much effort on this place, Earth, that relative to eternity, Guys, we're only here a couple nights. And yet you and I work so hard to get a little nicer car, a little shinier car, a little 3-season room. I want to get one more rung on the corporate ladder. I want to get one more nameplate on the corner office. I want one more fancy vacation. I want a little nicer house. We work so hard just to be a little bit more comfortable or a little bit more fancy or a little bit more whatever. And at some point, you just got to realize, like, we're only here a couple nights. Paul said, do the work of an evangelist, discharge all the duties of your ministry. For I'm already being poured out like a drink offering, and the time for my departure is near. Here's the thing, Paul is living with the end in mind. Paul is living with an eternal perspective. There's something about that. It goes on, I have fought the good fight, I have finished the race, I have kept the faith, and now there is in store for me fancier cars and bigger houses. No, there's in store for me the crown of righteousness, which the Lord, the righteous judge, will award to me on that day, and not only to me, but to also who have longed for his appearing. I believe that Paul is saying to Timothy, if you want to live a life that really matters, you better be able to have an eternal perspective. Because when you have an eternal perspective, then you can let go of ego and let go of status and let go of the possessions and let go of all those things and say, God, I'm here to do whatever you want me to do. And Lord, I don't get up every day and just think about one more thing I can get or one more accomplishment I can add or more letters at the end of my name or whatever it is. I get up every day and I'm thinking about that one moment when my eyes will open and there'll be, I don't know, a light at the end of the tunnel or pearly gates or something. But we'll die and we'll go to heaven and I will stand before Jesus. And no, we won't stand. It's Jesus. You're not going to stand. You're going to bow. Every knee will bow in front of Jesus. But I just hope that at that moment, I've lived my life in a way that Jesus will take his hand and put it underneath my chin and just sort of lift my eyes to connect with his. And I hope that he'll say to me and to you, well done, good and faithful servant. Come on in and share in your master's happiness. If I want to live a life that really matters, I want to grow closer to God. I want to grow closer to God. I want to endure hardship. I want to develop an eternal perspective. I want to discover my purpose. And then Paul concludes in verse 9. He says, do your best to come to me quickly. For Demas, because he loved the world, he deserted me, and Crescens has gone on to Galatia. Titus to Dalmatia. Luke is with me. Get Mark and bring him. I sent Tychicus to Ephesus. And when you come, bring... And he goes on. I'll let you read the rest of it. He just goes on and on talking about all these people in his life. Because you know what? When you're staring eternity in the face, you're thinking about God and you're thinking about people. You don't think about all that other stuff. Paul is thinking about all these people in his life. When I was in high school, there was this girl that I was kind of sweet on. And I was so smooth and so brave that the way I handled it was I wrote a note. And I said, do you like me? Circle 1, yes or no. No, we didn't have text. These girls over here are going, oh my gosh, he didn't even text her. No, we didn't have that, okay? We didn't have that. So we just wrote a note. And then what I did was I gave it to my friend to give to her friend. Some of you did this too, to give to her. And it said in there, do you like me? But it also said, if you do like me, meet me out on the practice field after school and before football. Because here's the thing, I played football and she was a cheerleader, you know. And so, of course, once I gave that note, I was toast for the rest of the day. I'm not thinking about math. I'm not thinking about history. I'm not thinking about any of those things. I'm just wondering, is she going to show up? And when I get to the end of the day, the bell rings and I run down and I get my cleats on in the locker room and I get my pads on and I run out to the practice field and she was there. Kind of thought you would applaud at this point. This is an exciting story, and I'm excited. Okay, so anyway, thanks for the love. Okay, here's the deal. I see her, and I invite her for a nice romantic walk around the practice field. And we decide we're going to hold hands, but not like this, like this. Because you know that makes all the difference when you hold it like this. So I'm holding hands with her, and guys, everything is going so well until these two guys walk out from the neighborhood next to me, next to the practice field. And they start going, oh, look at this, and kind of mocking us and making fun. And they come up to me, and there's two of them, there's only one of me. And they're making fun of me, and I go, okay, yeah. And then they start making fun of her. And I got a decision to make. Do I stand up for what's right? Do I stand up for her? Do I do the chivalrous thing? Do I say, hey, you can't? So I did. I said, listen, you can't talk to her like that. And the guy's like, oh, really? And I'm like, yeah, oh, really? And then he goes back, and we just go back and forth. And this escalates until we're doing the dance of the tough guys, which is where he puts his chest out, I put my chest out, we put our arms back like this, I cock my head to the right, he cocks his head to the left, and we just dance around each other, just daring somebody to go first. And sure enough, when I'm doing the dance, his friend gets down behind me on all fours, and I didn't see it. And so once he did that, this guy who was dancing with me, he just pushes me. Now, this guy's right here. I go back to save myself. I step back, but I can't because the guy's right there. So instinctually, I just go do a backflip, back handspring, land on my feet, and I'm like, "Puta!" Do you believe me? You don't believe me? All right. Well, I'll tell you what really happened. I fell again and again and again and again down the hill, hit my head on the fence. I'm seeing stars at this point, but do you know what else I saw? A sea of red and white jerseys as the Fighting Coleraine Cardinals all came out. My entire football team came out. And did those two guys stand up against insurmountable odds like I stood up against insurmountable? No, like little fraidy cats. They just ran away as my team came and had my back. Now, do you know why I tell you that story? Because that's how I met my wife. No, it's not. That would be a great story. That would be amazing. That would be a great story. It would. I wish that happened. I'd tell you that story because I think everybody needs a team to back them up. I mean, the truth is, I knew they were there the whole time. I knew they were watching everything. I could be more bold because I had a team. I could do the right thing with confidence because I had a team backing me up. I knew they'd be there for me. There were people that would be there for me. And I just share that with you because when I look at Paul, he's a guy that at the end of his letter, he's talking about all these people. He's talking about his team. He's talking about the people that mourned when he mourned, rejoiced when he rejoiced, prayed for one another, bared one another's burdens, held one another accountable, spurred one another on toward love and good deeds. Guys, everybody needs a team. And as I stand here in front of you in this room, but at all of our campuses, I want you to know something. Man, if you're brand new to this place, I want you to know that we have that in common. I've never been here before either. But one thing that we might not have in common, and that is this: I've gotten to spend some time with the people of this church, with Cam, with the team. Before I came up here, I had people from the church praying for me, just passionately, just reaching out to me and encouraging me. And I'm just going to tell you this: if you don't have a team, can I suggest this one? This is a church where I've experienced people weeping as they tell each other, "We love you." I've seen people in this church, I've seen them tell stories about how they encouraged each other. I've seen them talk about how they surrounded each other when they were going through tough times. I've seen people talk about how they just love one another and pray for one another. And I just want to say to you, in the room, if you're watching this online, I just want you to know, I think everybody needs a team. I believe if you want to live a life that really matters, if you want to live a life that makes a difference, draw closer to God. Draw closer to God. Discover your purpose in life. Endure hardships. Develop an eternal perspective. And find a great team. Can I pray for you? God, we love you. Lord, I pray that you would now, through the power of your Holy Spirit, take the meager words that I have spoken and would you just add your power to them. I pray, God, that you would open up spiritual ears and spiritual eyes, that people would hear not from me but from you. And I pray, God, that as you show them what the next step is for them to take in their relationship with you, I pray for courage. I pray, God, that you would show them the next step to take and then give them the courage to take it. And then, Father, thank you that we're not alone in our journey with you, but that we have people around us, people of compassion, people that know how to love God and love people. Lord, thank you for Jesus. It's in his name that we pray. Amen.
Thanks for watching Compassion Online. We'd love to invite you to join us for our live services with worship, prayer partners, and more. For exclusive online content, head to live.compassionchristian.com to join our community. And if you liked this sermon, well, you should check out the rest of the messages from this series in the playlist to the left. Also, click over here if you want to subscribe to see more videos like this one. We'd love to connect with you. Just head to compassionchristian.com/connect, and I'll reach out to you soon.